Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. This is a space where we seek to create and cultivate healthy conversations between those things we geek out on and the philosophical and theological questions that often arise out of our fandoms. Like, what does it mean to be human? What makes a hero? What makes a villain? How do the stories and narratives we geek out on shape how we live in the world? We are your priest to the geeks. We aren't all ordained, but we see ourselves as mediators at the intersection of geek culture and going deeper in our faith. We don't always have to agree, but we do respect each other, and we see everyone as a beloved child of God. Everyone geeks out on something, so come geek out with us and enjoy the show.
You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast. Would you rather share a pint after a hard day's work in the mines of Moria, or engage in stimulating conversation as you walk about the great halls of Rivendell? Well, guys, this is part of our flagship series for our annual theme of 2025, our theme of being polarization, the series being Finding the Good, where we're going to see some of these polarizing things in our fandoms. You know, we had science and faith, we had Jackie Chan versus Bruce Lee, and today we have elves versus dwarves, not just in the Lord of the Rings, the art of Middle Earth, whatever. We're going to talk about it just in general, because it shows up in a few different fandoms, and there's some interesting reasons for why I think that we might have a fun conversation with. And when I say we, I of course mean myself, Joshua Noel, not of Dwarven folk, not of importance, but the one who is of importance, the great wizard, Nick Polk. I want to say black, but like I don't want to like. Since this isn't video, I don't want to like mislead people. I'm talking about his beard specifically, because that's how wizards get their color.
Like Nick the Black, like the beard.
Yeah, the beard specifically.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, also of Jack Black fame, that's where Jack Black took his name from Nick, actually.
Yeah, from me specifically. Yeah. We go way back, me and Jack Black. But,
yeah,
but you're talking about you're important. You're just embodying the Hobbit virtue of humility.
Well, what's funny is like I play off oh, I'm humble, I'm the dummy. But then like if y'all pay attention, I build this lore where I'm like, we're creating a cult around Nick Polk, who's also great friends with Jack Black, and TJ helped God create the universe. And if you pay attention, I'm really setting myself up where like all of my friends are like gods for some reason, so that naturally you guys have to assume that I must be like at least a demigod.
I mean, you draw us all together, so who has the real power, you know?
That might be Trip, the great podfather, but...
True.
I kind of wish he was here for this. Should we stop and call him?
He would probably jump on, dude. He would nerd out so hard. Well,
now that we're already off the rails... If you listeners are on a laptop and you're like, man, I want to rate and review this nonsense, go over to Podchaser, go to Good Pods. Their websites is going to help the show a lot. Specifically, one of those two, it helps with search engines like Google because it likes those for some reason. But if you're on your phone, good news, you could still help rate, review, comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That's where most people listen to podcasts. And if you interact with us on those apps, it bumps us up in the algorithms, makes other people think we're important, and they'll be like, wow, there's a whole pantheon here of podcast hosts. And I'm like, yeah, you never knew until you rate and review. Other people, they'll never know the greatness of Nick Polk. So you got to do it so that when I bring Nick on and talk about how great he is, I'll have a lot of comments about, yeah, he's totally right about that. And of course, you can also sponsor our show on Apple Podcasts, Captivate, or Patreon. Today, we're going to shout out Russell Gentry. He's one of our supporters. We really appreciate it. And if you guys want your own shout out, again, Apple Podcasts, Captivate, or Patreon, $3 a month, and you can get your own shout out at the beginning and end of the episodes. But what I've been geeking out on recently is what we're going to be talking about next. I'm going to go first to see because I already told Nick about some of this. And
I like it.
So I'm gonna let our listeners know, and because I'm being sporadic, so I need to like give Nick time to like catch up with my sporadicness. During the May the 4th weekend, for whatever reason, Steam naturally had a May the 4th sale, which was cool. So I got like Fall of the Jedi or Jedi Survival, both of those games. And then Middle Earth was like, we need to compete for some reason. So then there was Spring in the Shire sale, and I got both Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor. And then on top of all that, I got Battlefront 2, like the old original Battlefront 2. And I got it all for like $25 on sale, like together. And I'm like, man, each of these usually are like $60. This was a great day. I haven't played all of them yet, but I'm geeking out on the fact that finals are over. I have all these games thanks to sales, and I have something to go do. But yeah, Nick, what about you?
You got two of the heaviest hitters there, man. Star Wars and Lord of the Rings for freaking $25. Kind of crazy.
Yeah, and it's stuff that I haven't even played yet because my I've never got a PS5, and my PS4 got to a point where it was so loud it was unbearable to play games anymore. So now I got a Steam. I'm catching up.
Yeah, my wife she bought me an Xbox, the latest Xbox, because I had an Xbox One, like the original VCR one. And it just wasn't cutting it anymore.
Not nice.
But what I've been nerding out on, a couple things. One was that it was recently Free Comic Book Day. I've never been, but I'm a big Diablo fan, and Diablo 4 is doing like a comic series, and so they had a free comic to announce their upcoming run that they're doing. That's kind of happening after the events of the latest DLC in Diablo. And then I watched Gilmore Girls for the first time all the way through. So I got super nerdy with that.
We should get an episode on that soon, too.
So good. I wrote a post about it on Tolkien Pop, So I got extra nerdy with it as well. Because surprisingly, lots of Lord of the Rings references in Gilmore Girls.
Yeah. There's lots of everything references in Gilmore Girls. There's so many.
It's just like a flagpole or flagship for a freaking pop cultural reference.
Yeah, in the fall last year, I learned the term like thawing. So it's like Noah Khan is thawing right now. And yes, Gilmore Girls every fall. Like they're thawing, and you're like, oh yeah, now it's time to get into it. So maybe in the fall we'll do a big episode and geek out. Two bearded men talking about Gilmore Girls. It'll be great.
More bearded men need to talk about Gilmore Girls.
Yeah, because I mean, let's be honest. Luke is the most goat, just maybe ever.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. Could not agree more.
Man. So, with all this out of the way, we got to get to the main topic. Well, let me say, if you guys want more of the Finding the Good series, where we're doing this like picking sides and then finding the good in the other side, there's a link down below in the show notes for the entire series. Check that out. But for now, we're going to get today's topic is Elves versus Dwarves. And it's going to be a fun one because I learned a little bit doing some research for this. I'm like, oh, this is some interesting history. Elves and Dwarves have a long history of rivalry and other things that we're going to discuss in several different IPs, though. Like, it's not just like Lord of the Rings. Inheritance Cycle, I think we've already mentioned that one. Or you mentioned it before the show, something. It's got it. You see it in Dungeons and Dragons. You see it in a few different places we're going to talk about. Mainly, I'm probably going to pull from Lord of the Rings and the Inheritance Cycle and Elder Scrolls will probably be the main ones that I pull from, just because that's what I'm most familiar with. But Nick might have some other interesting ones. Before we get into anything else, what are some of the ones that you're most aware of? And where do you think this conflict has started? I actually developed a theory through research, but I want to hear from you first because you're smarter than me and have a better beard.
Well, like I said, I'm kind of a one-trick pony where Tolkien's Legendarium is kind of my main thing. And so I'm not really as familiar with a lot of the like expansive universes. There's a couple other ones like Avatar: The Last Airbender that I am. There's no dwarves in that. I don't know if it's a real conflict, but I know the Witcher series, I think it's more of just a like ecological reality where I think dwarves were old and they don't reproduce as fast. Yeah. The elves in the Witcher, series are just faster at producing. And then of course humans reproduce way faster than both of them. And therefore elves are like on the decline. Dwarves are even like scarcer. And I know that because of the elves' reproduction rates, they kind of like push dwarves out, I think, in the history of The Witcher. But besides that, in Tolkien, that's kind of all I got for elves and dwarves, except for the conflict. I think probably comes up. It probably has its roots in Norse mythology.
Yeah.
From like the Poetic Edda and Prose Edda, right?
Yeah, I want to throw my theory by you and see if you think I'm right or if I'm stupid. Also, side note, I just remembered another one I can put out there. In Delicious in Dungeon, you see it again, where one of the characters is a dwarf and you have an elf, and they kind of talk a little bit about the rivalry. It's not like main headlight, but like it's common enough knowledge that even in like anime version of fantasy, it's still something that's present, that elves and dwarves don't always, love each other that much.
Right.
Which for some reason always ends, we'll get to this later, but it always ends up with like a fun elf and dwarf being friends because they're not supposed to like each other. Like, I don't know, like it happens always. It's like we only establish this conflict so that we can have an entertaining buddy sequence. Like, I don't know, man.
I just love that that's like racial reconciliation in fantasy is always the elf and the dwarf.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's great. Okay, my theory from, mind you, like maybe 5 minutes of Google research. So this is not like deep knowledge or anything, guys. It looks like in Norse mythology, because like I know that Tolkien pulled a lot from Norse mythology. There's this really weird thing where all dwarves really were, where just like you had like tree elves and, your regular elves and dark elves, they were like associated with dark elves, but they were like the elves of the earth, like under earth. That's what elves were. They were just dwarves. So it wasn't like they weren't depicted as short little grubby men. They were just like elves, but underground, and they were associated with dark elves. So they were like, because it's like under earth, the underworld kind of association, back when we thought heaven was up above and hell was down below, they're down below. So these must be the bad guys. And to kind of see that evolve. And I think if I'm right about this is where Tolkien's pulling it from, what Tolkien does, making the dwarves not just the little bad guys because they're under the ground, actually is super cool when you think about it.
Oh, it's great. And I think people don't know. And like a lot of that underground elves, the distinction, I don't think was so hard and fast. Like there's leprechauns and brownies, dwarves, elves were kind of in the same category of like weird kind of evil spirits at the most and tricksters at the least. But like you said, over time with like the invention of like the Shakespearean or like the Victorian era fairies who were like, kind of trickster, positive nature spirits, Tolkien kind of took those elements and transformed them. And then, of course, modern fantasy has done the rest. Oh, and goblins. Goblins were also kind of in the same category as dwarves, elves, and leprechauns and stuff until way later.
Yeah. Yeah. I was trying to think. I don't think there are any dwarves in Beowulf, but there's some like similar stuff like what you're talking about. And I know Tolkien pulled a lot from Beowulf too. So.
Oh yeah, hugely.
Yeah. So it sounds like I might not be totally off base. So what I'm picking at that I think is interesting, that I want to hear like Nick's wisdom about. One of the things, and this is where like, again, I don't know a lot about Tolkien, so I can just say whatever and then have Nick correct me afterwards. And I love this. Some of my understanding is like Tolkien, one of his problems with his own work was kind of to do with like some of the ogres or the goblins kind of stuff. Cause it's like he had this theology as a Catholic that everything was created good. So what was interesting to me is what you see is like usually dwarves in Norse mythology, they were kind of bad because they were underworld or tricksters, something, but they were associated with the dark elves. And here he has where, so Eru Ilúvatar, the main god, creates elves and humans directly. Dwarves are still under the ground. They're not created directly from Eru Ilúvatar. They're created from Aule because shenanigans. And then they're given their life by Eru Ilúvatar still. So they're not. So you still kind of have this kind of like distinction of maybe they're not quite as good as human and elves, but they're still given their life from Eru Ilúvatar, and they're still seen as good, I think, for the most part in Arda, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's part of it is that for those who don't know, Aule is a sort of like god figure, lower G god. And in Tolkien's universe, there's a capital G god who creates everything, but he creates the gods and the angels first. Kind of weird. And then he's like, all right, gods and angels, help me create the rest of the world. And he's like, by the way, I'm going to create some other children of mine, elves and humans, so watch out. And Aule's like, man, I can't wait that long. So because he is not the omnipotent deity god, he can only make these kind of meat puppets and can't control them. Or he can only control them so they don't have their own will. And so Ilúvatar's like, what are you doing, dude? Like, you trying to be like me? Not allowed. And Aule's like, oh, I'm so sorry. But then because of Aule being like repentant and just trying to create and wanting to has a desire to like be with something to share life with, Iluvatar basically it gives them life and then adopts them. And they're the way that the dwarves view the end of the world, they believe that they're going to be with Aule creating the new Arda after its destruction.
Oh, man. That is so interesting. That's going to make there's some fun connections with that and what happens in the inheritance cycle with dwarves too.
Hey friends, your pal Will Rose here. Sometimes I ask myself, have you ever wondered how you can support systematic geekology? Yes, I have. And well, if you're like me, you want systematic geekology to continue to grow and thrive. And you can do that by joining Patreon for as little as $3 a month. As a patron, you get bonus episodes. We answer bonus questions that our patrons get to hear. We have special shout outs. We have certain episodes that the patrons pick. So you help us create and curate the content that we put out for the world to hear. You even get free merch. And when I say that we're a worldwide podcast, that I'm not being hyperbolic. Somebody told me that we have over 20,000 subscribers from all over the world, and just half of those subscribers join Patreon for $3 a month. We would be set on keeping moving forward with the tech that we need to have the quality of podcast that we want our hearers to experience. And it'll help us get to certain events and conventions so that we can see you face to face and geek out with you in person. And let me just share that there's no shame, no guilt. If you can't join Patreon at this point, that's okay. That's okay. Just keep listening, keep sharing, keep liking, because yes, we're proud of what we're doing at Systematic Geekology. And friends, guess what? You can subscribe to Patreon for free to receive one extra bonus episode a month via the Patreon or Spotify app. That is fantastic. And we're glad that you're a part of it.
But for now, I'm gonna stick on Arda for a little bit because this is interesting. Because you're mentioning how he tried to create, but he couldn't really do it on his own. And basically, Eru Iluvatar is like, or can we just say Iluvatar? Is that fine?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay, Iluvatar is like, hey man, wanting to create, that desire is good, but you ain't me. But then he blesses it anyway. But right. Repentance, whatever. And I think that's what we see the dwarves do in the story of Arda, right? Like they're constantly trying to create. And then you see them starting to tear down trees. And then Aule's girlfriend, I don't remember her name. So right now it's girlfriend. Yeah, that's one sexy lady. But she was like, yo, what about the trees? And that's how the Ints end up coming to be. But like what you see is like the dwarves are kind of made in the image of Aule almost, because like they're wanting to create, but in their doing that, they're not doing it perfectly. They're not doing it as maybe Eru Iluvatar would have wanted, where I think the elves you see working with nature a little bit better, and then humans are flawed because, well, we're humans. So when we write stories that involve humans, it's like, yeah, screw them. They suck. Humans historically haven't liked ourselves very much.
Yeah, and even the elves, this kind of draws up from the beginning of their conflict. The elvish name for the dwarves is Nagrim, which means the stunted people. Basically, the people who are too short because they're short not people. Perfect.
And now I'm going to play the song, I think it's from Rolling Stones, The Short People Got No Reason. Have you heard this?
Are you talking about like can't get enough satisfaction, but instead of short people?
Oh, I don't think so. Okay,
or are you talking
keep
about
talking. Tell me, why did Iluvatar make humans and elves? And I actually am going to look up the song and play it. I think because it's just so freaking funny.
Yeah, I mean, Iluvatar created humans and elves because he wanted creatures to enjoy and participate and partner with him in creating.
But why
things.
Both? Why not just the elves? Because the elves seem like they're more godly anyway, right?
Honestly, it's more of Tolkien. Tolkien wanted to explore what it would be like to be a human with basically immortality, and the elves
they're time lords.
Yeah, and Tolkien kind of says that they're the same species as men. That's how some of them can get married and have kids. But I think it's more of Tolkien basically doing a thought experiment with
Interesting.
with elves and immortality.
Yeah. So more generically then in Arda, and I think this tends to be true over the course of most things. The elves live longer than other species. They're more sophisticated. You know, they like intellectual conversations. They're probably eating vegetarian meals and maybe having some wine. And then your dwarves are meat, mead, more pints. And then they're digging, they're working, they're building with their hands, but they're also good craftsmen. So they're about almost like industry, but not in the same way that we see Sauron and all the other characters that Tolkien kind of writes as the bad guys. Dwarven industry is more working with the earth instead of against the earth, I guess is how you would say it. And I think that's for both species is kind of true across the fields, maybe.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are exceptions, but here's my favorite dwarf song now. Because what did you say they're called by the
stunted
elves?
People?
Stunted people. Okay, so it's actually Randy Newman, short people.
Oh, even better. God, freaking
it's so
better.
Funny.
Short people got no reason. Short people got no reason. Short people got no reason to live. They got little hand, little eye.
I don't know why. It's so my dad's side of the family are all kind of short. And for some reason, one of my aunts, because I was only allowed to listen to Christian music with two exceptions, being Disney music and then these mixed CDs that my aunt would make me so that I had some semblance of culture.
Right.
And for some reason, she put that on one of the CDs. So every time my dad was getting on my nerves, my dad's been shorter than me since I was in middle school. I would play this song because I just thought it was so funny.
Now that you play it, I had forgotten about that song, but I'm pretty sure someone at work showed me that song.
They got little hands and little feet, and they go around telling great big lies, you know?
Little eyes.
Yeah. That's the dwarves. No, I'm just kidding. Dwarves are not going around telling lies. That's not what they're known for. But some of the other ones. So in Inheritance Cycle, this is for me. I never thought of dwarves as particularly religious. Usually, when I encounter them in stories and stuff, they're just like little men who want to work. You know, hi ho, right. Off to work we go. And then we're going to have some meat. But in the Inheritance Cycle, you also see that they're like deeply religious. They're willing to lay down their lives for their religious beliefs. And they believe that if they died, as long as they were buried in rock with the earth, that they would go to be with their God and kind of be able to like help rebuild stuff in an afterlife. So it's kind of interesting that Tolkien has that too. Tolkien was obviously first. Inheritance Cycle is going to pull a lot from Tolkien's ideas.
Which is the Inheritance Cycle again?
It's Aragon, Eldest. I can't remember the other 2 or 3 books. Really good, though. They're really good. I listened to them on audiobook. I never actually read them. It was funny. This is one of the most irritating things maybe ever. My brother was obsessed with these books when he was a kid, right? Yeah. And he wrote the author back like before I think the second book came out. So this is like back when Christopher, whatever his name is, was basically he wasn't that well known. So he wrote my brother back. My brother had this really long, nice handwritten letter from this author who's now like super famous, and he lost it. And I'm like, Matt,
would you do that?
Dude, like that was, he was like, oh, it was just some author I liked. It was just some guy. No one will remember him. And I'm like, Matt, dude, you messed up. But so beyond that, in Elder Scrolls, this is going to be another interesting thing with the dwarves. Elves, I feel like are pretty much the same everywhere. Like I don't find elves as interesting, which might tell you guys where I'm going to go here. But in Elder Scrolls, they're not actually dwarves. They're like the Dwemlin or something like that. Right. Have you played Elder Scrolls?
Yeah, I played a little bit of Oblivion, a little bit of Morrowind, and I played Skyrim the most.
Yeah, Skyrim.
So I know that when you go into those dungeons, like they're not really anywhere, right? Because you basically fight their like little contraptions that they made or whatever.
Yeah, they're like a forgotten lost race that were the Dwemer. And which the cool thing with like the contraptions that you're talking about is like it's all kind of a steampunk vibe, I feel like. Totally. I love the architecture. But yeah, the Dwemer were actually like dark elves that lived under the earth. So like that's going way back to like the Norse stuff again, but they weren't just elves. They were just associated with the elves. They were still their own creature. Right. We don't know a lot about them on purpose. I think Elder Scrolls just thought it would be funny. because they didn't die off. They just gone. Don't know why. It's just a mystery. The game has been going on forever. You think they've given us something about it? Nah.
Tolkien calls that textual ruins. Or, sorry, he doesn't call them textual ruins. There's this Tolkien scholar who talks about, because there's things in Tolkien that are unexplained. And you're like, why is this lost civilization here? And you're just like, I don't know. It's called textual ruins. The ruins are there, and it makes it like, it increases the depth of the feeling of realness, you know?
That's great. Dude. All right. I've played D&D like twice. I don't know a lot about it. Can you tell me anything about like how elves and dwarves are depicted there? Do you know much about it? Or?
Literally know nothing about the lore behind D&D. Very little. I've played multiple times. I know very little about the lore.
Yeah. Well, as far as like when you play and stuff and the way they do interactions, is it still basically the same as Lord of the Rings as far as you can tell, or like how they relate to each other, or is it just kind of whatever the GM feels like that day?
Literally no clue.
Cool. I'm sure Magic the Gathering probably has history too. I know I don't know it. And since you didn't mention it, I'm assuming you don't know.
No, I play it, but they're kind of separate, I guess. I feel like elves are more prominent.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there's a lot of dwarf cards, comparatively speaking, to how prevalent elf cards are.
Gotcha. All right. So I think for the purpose of our conversation then, we'll keep elves are pretty much static. You know, they live a long time, high culture, philosophy, you know, that kind of stuff. We're not going to do the version of dwarves that are basically bad elves under the ground. I think for this, we'll stick with like what more people are familiar with from like Delition and Dungeon, the Inheritance Cycle, Lord of the Rings, that kind of stuff. So we'll stick with like just like the normal short people who like to work in mines and eat meat, drink mead. We're going with these versions. Nick, you got to pick a side. Elf or dwarf? Where are you going?
You know, I'm probably still going to go with the elves. You know, I love dwarves, but, you know, elves, I feel like just have comfier, you know, dwellings. I feel like it's going to be cooler. I feel like the food's going to be a little more, you know, upper, you know, quality, and they have awesome libraries. And dwarves are not prone to write things down very often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, this is where I'm in conflict. I love to read. I just do. I'm a big reader, but like personality wise, everything else, man, give me some meat, give me some mead. I'm going to be like that one scene in the first Hobbit movie where we're just like throwing crap around, singing songs. And just like, oh yeah. Like, cause they're not like, to me, they don't betray like toxic masculinity. They like to sing and stuff still. They're just like, we're down, we're getting dirty, and we're going to have a good time. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I don't need the long life, sophistication, that kind of like whatever. I don't want to eat a vegan meal. I want to eat meat, drink some beer, and sing cool songs by a campfire. But I also want to read. So like that's where I'm like, the Inheritance Cycle is really what won me over. Whenever I see like these dwarves who are also highly religious, I'm like, it's hard for them to have some of these beliefs if there isn't something written down, like some formal system here. So maybe I'm like a high priest dwarf in the Inheritance Cycle.
Ooh,
I don't know.
I like that. I like the priest, the cleric dwarf there.
Like now we're going to throw in. Yeah. So like if you were an elf, what class would you be?
Oh man, if I was an elf, what class would I be? I would honestly probably be an archer, just because I would have a higher chance of surviving. That's probably what I'd be. Because so
you're going to be
live a
Legolas.
boring life. Yeah, basically Legolas for sure.
Yeah. And I'm your cleric dwarf friend.
Here's the thing. You'll bring the healing. It's fine. You know, maybe bring in, you know, channel of the god. I don't know. Do you know what the dwarven god D&D is at all?
Not in D&D.
What's the dwarven god for the Inheritance Cycle?
Moradin. I might be saying that incorrectly. The problem with Inheritance Cycle is like I hated the Aragon movie, so like I've only read the books, so I have that problem where I'm probably mispronouncing everything.
I mean, it's fair. The movie, works, get it out of here.
Yeah, it was bad. It was really bad.
So it's a terrible use of Jeremy Lyon's talent.
So true. All right, so we picked our sides. We kind of said why a little bit. here's like the thing, the gimmick for our Finding the Good series, you got to defend the other side. You got to say like what can you, in the deepest parts of you, like if you were like, what is good about dwarves? As someone who chose the elven side, what good do you see in dwarven culture that you think you could glean from?
One of the best things, obviously I'm going to use Tolkien as kind of my reference point, but in the Lord of the Rings, the Legendarium, the history of Tolkien's universe, the dwarves are one of the least corruptible races, where when Sauron creates the rings to corrupt and control people, the dwarves, it increases kind of their greed, but Sauron can't control them. And so they are kind of who they are. They know what they want. They know what their life is about. And they're not going to be corrupted by outside influence. And I find that really respectable. And the elves are not that way. They're a little more corruptible. Obviously, men even more so because they're not immortal.
Yeah.
But the elves are always trying to kind of keep making cool science stuff, keep learning, and Sauron takes advantage of that.
Yeah. See, that's something I didn't even know about my own side that I chose today.
I know.
I feel wiser already.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's what I love. So I mentioned like I love reading and stuff, but like I think the thing, if I'm finding the good in the other side, I'm looking at I chose dwarf. I'm looking at the elven side. Like, what do I love about this culture? What do I still find that we can glean from elven culture, which again is fictional, but still, their respect for language is so freaking cool. Like they still speak the language of the gods, especially like I'm sticking with Arda mostly, but also like when you see how they name weapons or like how they like why they name things the way they do, why they write things the way they do, what they call their different halls. Like they just have such a respect for language. And that's something I feel like I could do better. I know whenever I do, I'm a little Bible nerd. I usually just read the English, but every now and then when I decide I'm going to read some Aramaic or Hebrew or something, I'm like, oh wait, yeah, I do glean more from looking at the language of this thing. And, even if I read other religions like the Quran and I look at like the Arabic and I do like a little word study, you learn more from respecting original language, respecting why things named the way it is, the history of a word, even in this, like, I didn't know anything about dwarf, and then you're telling me the old Elvish word, and like we got like a little fun song moment out of it, and like I'm looking at like the history of the Norse, and I'm like, man, if I just knew how much was packed into the word dwarf, I would have such a better respect for it. And I'm like, I don't know. So I guess that's my big thing with elves. That I'm like, man, I love their love of words.
Yeah. Oh yeah. To one other fun fact is that the elves, I can't remember who it is. So the elfish script that we see in like Lord of the Rings and the normal stuff were created, the writing style was created by a guy named Feanor, who also loves to craft things. One of the most dwarf-like elves out of the history. But there was a person before him who created an alphabet or writing system. And I want to say it's Pangaloth is his name. Don't quote me, I might be wrong on the name. But it was called the Keirth, and the dwarves use the Keirth for their writing in Lord of the Rings. So their writing style is rooted in the Elvish invention of language.
That's super cool. Man, that's cool. So this is a little bit random, but since you mentioned it, what I find interesting for me, like in Arda, Lord of the Rings kind of stuff, dwarves seem like not like anti-magic, but like they don't mess with that stuff. Delicious in Dungeon, the dwarf that's part of your main group there doesn't like magic at all. In the Inheritance cycle, though, dwarves are really big on like ruins and stuff in the caves. So like they have like their own kind of like ancient earth magic, and I kind of like that vibe. Yeah. I wonder at what point they went from like these dark elf kind of mysterious magic stuff under the ground to nope, we build now. Or if like it was a little bit of both in Norse and then we just highlighted one and left the other out, or what happened?
That's a great question. I don't know. Also, I was looking up so actually Feanor created the Keirth. Sorry, so it wasn't the other guy. Man, I honestly don't even know. I think probably it had to do with
probably Tolkien.
I think so, because what Tolkien does is that there was also which happens throughout history too. Usually stereotypes of certain fantasy races are connected to real life interactions with people of different ethnicities, nationalities, right? And so one of the most negative things that Tolkien wrestled with is that he uses a lot of anti-Semitic tropes at first in creating the dwarves, which is actually pretty prevalent in
I'm thinking about
fantasy.
even how they're depicted in the movies and stuff, and I'm like, I can see it. Yeah.
Right. And so on top of that, to say like, oh, they're evil, they're from the ground, there is sort of this implicit, or inherent anti-Semitism. And I think Tolkien tried to later in life bring that out and be like, okay, he even talks about how the language of the dwarves is inspired by Hebrew, like actual Hebrew language. And so I think he's trying to, like, he eventually tries to like elevate it, make the dwarves a good culture and whatever.
Yeah, I kind of like that connection. And this isn't based on anything smart. If people are listening and wondering, this is just like vibes. Like the Hebrew language, from what I've studied, really does feel more earthy. Where I guess like the Greek and stuff of like the New Testament feels a little bit more sophisticated. So I kind of like this, like the dwarves or the Old Testament Hebrew, and the elves or like the New Testament Greek.
Well, I think too, especially like the Old Testament and a lot of the, the Hebrew Bible, the land is like one of the biggest themes that, like you said, it's like feels earthy. And Tolkien, which his theory I think is wrong, is that in modern day linguistics, but he was writing and thought, and I think even in his day it was wrong, but he thought that language had inherent vibes in them. So he thought words could literally sound worse than others. And that it was potentially like the platonic form of a word, essentially.
See, the thing is, the problem with that is like, that's so subjective. Cause like for me personally, I don't like hearing French. I don't know what it is. It just is. It's like, it's supposed to be like this romantic language, but I hear it and I'm like, nah, give me some German, some Russian, some Italian. Oh, like Latin, Spanish. I love it all. For some reason, French is like the one language that I listen to that I'm like, I don't want to hear this anymore.
Go away before I taunt you a second time.
I just offended like all these people who are listening to our podcast in France, because there are a few, and I forgot about that. Sorry, guys.
There's some French people.
I don't like your language.
Sorry, French people.
Some Canadians do.
Oh, sorry.
Listen, I'm sorry, guys. I apologize. I'm an ignorant American dwarf priest. But
is Canada even a real country? Sorry, that's a South Park reference.
So Nick, I do want to get at since we talked about Arda a lot. When you get into the Lord of the Rings movie, like a lot of people might not understand why in that movie it exists, because that's like I think that's most people's like main point of reference is like Legolas and Gimli. Gimli's like, oh, dwarves or elves, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Legolas is like, a dwarf. Sorry, in my mind, Legolas is like way more snooty than he actually is.
Yes, the dwarves.
But so for people who aren't aware, like when Lord of the Rings starts, why is Gimli and Legolas like? Where's that tension coming from?
Yeah, so for those who, like, obviously, if you're thinking of like the Fellowship of the Ring movie when they're at the Council of Elrond, and Gimli says something, he's like, "I'll die before I let the ring go into the hands of an elf," or whatever. And you're like, what the heck? Where is that coming from? So in Tolkien's world, there's 3 ages, kind of like how we do BC and AD. There's first age, second age, third age, and there's a fourth age at one point. But these span kind of thousands of years for them. And it goes all the way back to the first age in the Legendarium, where the stunted people, right? We talked about that already. The Elvish language is already like, oh, we're better than you because Iluvatar created us directly and you had to get adopted. But later on, so actually there's also lots of stuff. So people thought, so there is stuff in Tolkien still that shows that dwarves, some of them did side with Sauron at one point. And so...
Oh, interesting.
And there's also evidence to show that elves thought that like dwarves were sort of like orcs in a way, and they would literally hunt them for sport. So there's that.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that would do it.
Yeah. And so one of the main conflicts that happens is that sometime in the first age, there is a elvish king named Thingol, Okay. And he rules this realm in Middle Earth. And he makes a alliance with a dwarf kingdom called Nogrod. And they're amazing smiths. They create jewelry. And he gets a Silmaril, which is an amazing magical jewel that gives you lots of power. It's very sought after. And he's like, hey, what's up, dwarves? Come make me a cool necklace so I can put the Silmaril on and I can have it. And the dwarves are greedy. Everyone wants the Silmaril. The Thingol's also very greedy. This is what the Silmaril does to people. And the dwarves are like, cool, you give us the necklace because we made it. We don't want to give it to you. And Thingol insults them. They kill Thingol. The dwarves killed the elven king. The elves, of course, kill that group of dwarves. The Nogrod dwarves now declare war on the elves and slaughter and kill the elves. And then there's another group of elves that come and kill the dwarves. And that basically sets off the rest of the history of the dwarven and elvish conflict in Middle-earth.
Yeah, yeah. And there's crazy stuff because they're both like good guys too, but like then there's times where like, you know, the clear bad guys, the orcs and like Sauron and stuff happen, and one side's like, well, I'm not going to help the other side, and then it just kind of perpetuates of the, oh, you didn't help us, so now we're not going to help you. It's very mature.
I'm pretty sure the first instance of murder is the elves committed first, so, and it's against each other. So, you know, like you said, there's everyone's good, but not everyone. But most of the dwarves, elves, and men, everyone's good for the most part. They just do naughty things sometimes.
Yeah, and sometimes don't help. Not helping is really seen as super evil in Middle Earth stories. And I think rightfully so. It's just hard for us to see it in our world because we're like, well, why should we go help Ukraine? That's just going to, take away from me. And, we're just very self-centered because all you see is the world here. You don't see what's happening in Ukraine. And then, same thing in Palestine right now. And America's been historically bad at this. But America is kind of like, I'm trying to think what it was. What is it when the elves didn't come for, I'm blanking here. Imagine seeing Dwarf Kingdom under attack. They're the last people standing.
You're talking about the prologue to the Hobbit movies. They do this thing where the dwarves need help from Smaug after he's attacking, and the elves run away. That is a made up thing from the movie, by the way.
Interesting.
And it's not. And also, Gondor not trying to help Rohan, also not a real thing.
I knew that one. I didn't know the first one. For some reason, I thought that was in there. But this is why you're the Tolkien expert, and I'm the guy who likes Tolkien.
Like you said, the theme is there, though, helping people and being assistants. And we see that, and we're like, dang, that's really bad. And it creates conflict in the movies.
Yeah. But we're going to go with the movie just so I can make the analogy. But like America are the elves a lot of the time, right? Like even World War II, we did not want to be involved. We were just like watching other people get attacked. And we're like, well, what about our needs? And what about, our people? We can't afford to do this until it becomes on our shores. And then it's like, now it's suddenly our problem. We're the elves, watching the dwarves get attacked, but we just don't see it. So we can distance ourselves and be selfish. And we're still doing it today with Ukraine and Palestine and other conflicts. And yay, America. Yeah. You see my Captain America shield. I love America.
Yay.
And I will find the good in it too. So, but moving forward, I like the elves a little bit better knowing that was a made up thing for the movie. But
here at Systematic Ecology, we believe in a few things. We believe that there is freedom in Christ to like what you like. We believe that Christian nationalism is a heresy. And probably most important that I'm going to talk about today, at least, is that we believe the best place to spend your extra cash is on the Systematic Ecology merch store. That's right. This is a shameless shill for our own products. We go through Creator Spring, and we have a few great products on there. Me personally, I'm a big black shirt kind of guy, muted colors. But there's nothing better to throw a little something extra on there with a black baseball cap, the dad hat with the Systematic Ecology logo on it. That's a classic. I just really think if you got a couple, $30 extra, that's for us.
So in a lot of different IPs, you know, we mentioned Legolas and Gimli, like that's the big one. You see them kind of reconciling, becoming best friends, fighting together in the Lord of the Rings movies and books. In Delicious in Dungeon, since I brought it up, I'll use it. You know, our dwarf character, whose name escapes me right now, really didn't want to trust magic, really didn't want to trust the elves. But when he came to a situation where he could either help the group by allowing the magic to assist him or turn back, he learns to cooperate. He learns to, you know, work with the magic. And we have these big stories of reconciliation in the inheritance cycle. The elves and dwarves don't like each other, but our main character Aragorn is being mentored from a priest in the dwarven thing, me. You know, he's going to the dwarves and learning about philosophy, different stuff, and getting help from them. But also he's training in magic from the elves. So we see this cooperation when it needs to happen, and it comes over and over and over again. Like, it's just so common. Like, we pit them against each other just so we can have them learn to cooperate, like we mentioned earlier. Nick, why does this keep happening in our fantasy stories? Why do we keep wanting to pit them against each other just to make them reconcile and work together?
My assumption is probably that it has roots in Tolkien. And it's probably also just such a pervasive problem that's been a part of human history, is that there's always been some sort of xenophobia, whatever it's informed by. And you know, a lot of these fictional worlds, that's where humans kind of have a safe place to wrestle with those questions. And, you know, if it's there and people want that in the world, you know, use elves and dwarves to create the conflict and show some reconciliation. So hopefully that it kind of reflects back into our own world.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. So something sci-fi does a lot that Will pointed out for me, that helps me, is it often makes you ask how you treat the other or what makes us human compared to these other things. What I think fantasy does that's a little bit different with some of these races is it, like you're talking about xenophobia, like it makes us ask this question of like, why do we other? Not like how do we treat the other, but I think a lot of times in fantasy, it's asking more why rather than how. And and I think part of it probably comes from what you were talking about earlier, where like certain ones get grouped with some of these racial stereotypes, like you were talking about with the dwarves. And I know you see that with some of the dark elf stuff and certain things that we're not going to go there. Right. Marvel, looking at you. But we see some of this, and I think because it's been used to depict race poorly, it's just really natural to use that same story that, you know, where we depicted things in a way that was evil. We now use that same story, reconciling the medium by asking why we do this in the first place. Yeah,
I think too, the elves are kind of like this. On the other end, the elves are like supermodels, perfect, quote unquote, perfect specimens. And dwarves, on the other hand, are like hairy, short, you know, not as attractive features. And so I think it's a place where there is no such thing as the perfect person, right? There's no, like, that doesn't exist. And so to have this weird, happy medium in between through this reconciliation, you know, kind of, I think, trying to capture something that's more real.
Yeah. No, all that's interesting. So you know, I think most of our listeners know that I also am part of another podcast, the Whole Church Podcast, and I care deeply about the church and church unity, that kind of stuff. I've been working on ecumenical stuff with that podcast for like 8 or 9 years now, or something crazy, like basically a decade. Like, huge chunk of my life has been dedicated to this. So when I see some of the stuff we see in these fantasy stories, I can't help but think of like how the church in America right now is othering immigrants, or how our progressive church in America is othering the conservative church in America that's othering the progressive because they're not real Christians. You know, we're just using the true Scotsman argument back and forth, because you're not a real Christian because you don't love immigrants, and you're not a real Christian because you love gay people too much, and you're not a real Christian because, you know, like we always do this othering, we always do this like pushing people away, and the church has become so fractured. Like, to me, it breaks my heart, and that's why I care so much about this. But when I look at this stuff in fantasy and how frequently the conflicted elves and dwarves can come together, I got to believe there's something the church can learn. Nick, what's your wisdom for the church from the elf dwarf conflict that they need to look at?
One of the things too, and I'm going, you know, Tolkien has an essay called On Fairy Stories, where he basically makes a whole argument about why fantasy is a legitimate art form. There's 3 main things he said it does. It's fantasy's functions. 1, we go to escape because the world sucks. And we need a breather. 2, we get recovery. So what that means is, like, things in the world where like, man, life sucks. But then we see Legolas and Gimli become best friends and go to freaking Valinor together, which normally wouldn't happen. You're like, dang, that's awesome. I didn't know friendships could be like that.
Yeah.
And then it's consolation where we're consoled, we're comforted by that. So that when we return to our world, we have this kind of new set of eyes to try to manifest, better realities in our world. And so I think that this racial reconciliation between elves and dwarves, specifically in Tolkien and probably influenced in other, intellectual properties, is that if we have fictional examples that do that well, there's hope that we can do that in our world.
Yeah, man, I could shout hallelujah. And I think and if you guys love the Bible, that's a lot of the points of our like apocalyptic literature and our prophecy literature in biblical work is like, because life sucks right now. Let me tell you the future. And a lot of times there's a lot of violence and crazy stuff in the Bible that I'm like, some of that I don't love. I don't agree with all of it. Right. But the point of so much of it, especially like if you look at the book of Daniel, which I'm really passionate about, is that there's hope. And I think if that's what you get from these stories, that's worthwhile. Because I think one of the reasons why the church is so divided is because of fear. We fear the other. Xenophobia again, right? we have this fear of like, oh, you're not really Christians. And if people believe what you're saying, then all of a sudden they're going to burn in hell for eternity. Or you're not really Christians and people believe what you're saying, they'll never know the real Jesus. And like maybe legitimate fears, right? But if we let fear drown out hope, then reconciliation becomes impossible. So I think seeing these stories of fantasy and having this hope of reconciliation can probably speak a lot more than us trying to hash out our arguments that we're never going to agree on anyway.
Yeah. And the blame is usually a lot. We carry our groups and us carry a lot of the blame that we don't want to admit, because elves and dwarves, usually the conflict is rooted in both sides simultaneously. And then it just festers and grows.
Man, good stuff. Well, did you have, I don't have anywhere to go with that. That's, I think it's good, poignant truth. Did you have anything else you want to add about this or just about elves and dwarves in general before we head to our wrap up here?
No, I just said, I alluded to Gimli and Legolas going to Valinor, which is basically kind of like heaven. And so there's this idea of like, we should all be heading to the good place, a better world. Like, let's do it. Like, it's there. We've got examples. Yeah.
Yeah. What's up? Is it Beren and Luthien? Is that the story I'm thinking of where the human and the elf are talking about eternity kind of stuff?
Oh, that is the Athrobeth. That is Finrod and
I don't know. I'm terrible at names.
Andreth, maybe. That might be. Yeah. It might be Andreth. Finrod
Google
and
will know, guys. I promise Google knows.
Yeah.
Well, all right, then let's wrap this up. I'm excited to just kind of jump into this and for our bonus question, right? We always do a bonus question for our patrons or Captivate listeners or Apple Podcast sponsors. And today's a fun one. We're going to say the question simple. What good can be found in ogre society? It's a finding the good bonus episode of, where can we find the good in ogres? But before we get to that, we're going to do some recommendations. Nick, do you want to go first or you want me to go first? Give you a little bit of time to think.
You go first.
Okay. This one, I'm basically recommending this for Nick because I told all of our listeners about this like a million times, I feel like. Hunger in the Dusk is a comic book series written by my favorite author, G. Willow Wilson. High fantasy. For me, it is my favorite fantasy not written by Tolkien. It's
okay.
A race known as the Van Gogh, which we're learning a lot about. Maybe they're not as evil as we thought, which is interesting. Attacking ogres and humans and ogres had to make an alliance of reconciliation because of that threat, which is only threatening them, it turns out, because of a bigger threat. It's so good. It's so good. And just like the way the world's built out and the art is like, I really think you would like it. I really do. And she's also just a fantastic writer. But right now you can get like volume 1, the graphic novel, and then like I'll text you when volume 2 comes out if you like it.
Okay,
so
I just got it on. I've got it on my search. I got it up here. Hunger in the Dusk. Yeah. I got it.
I found out volume 1 also is available on Kindle Unlimited if you have that. So that's kind of cool. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so you recommendation. It doesn't have to be specific towards me. I'm like, I'm talking to Nick. I wanted to tell him about this anyway.
No, I love it, especially with comics,
Yeah.
just digging in a
Because I
little
know
bit.
you just started getting into them. I'm like, hey, this is one. Yeah, she's won an Eisner Award for her sci-fi comic series, which
Dang.
is like, yeah. So she's like the GOAT.
Okay, Willow.
Anyway.
All right, Willow.
Yeah. All right, man. What you got?
I think that, I'm going to go a little older. I'm going to say go for the classics. I'm talking about the classic literature. I've kind of been making my way through some stuff as an English teacher, and I'm reading Gulliver's Travels right now, which is like one of the first satires in the Western, quote unquote, literary canon, if you will. But it's fun. It's cool. There's a reason why there's things that are classics. We should add more to the classics. We should expand the Western canon or abolish it and just make things awesome. But they're worth reading, and reading the classics,
Yeah.
Check out a little, Great Gatsby. Check out a little Moby Dick. Go for it.
Also, listen, Catholic Church, if you're listening, I'm not opposed to you making a Newer Testament. I think it would be great to have Old Testament, New Testament, Newer Testament. And I'd read it. Depending on what you put on. I mean, I would read it no matter what you put in there. Whether I agree with it or not would probably depend on what you put in there.
The Gospel of Joshua Noel.
Yeah, there we go. It would be terrible, but do it anyway. Well, guys, again, if you're on a laptop, please consider rating and reviewing our show on Podchaser or Good Pods, one of those two websites. It's going to help our show gain recognition and make it easier to find in search engines like Google, which is where most people search for things. So Podchaser, Good Pods, that helps us a lot. But if you're not on a laptop, so you don't want to go through like the mobile websites because they're just a pain. If you're on your phone, consider rating, reviewing, commenting our show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It's going to help prioritize our show in those apps, algorithms, which is where most people listen to their podcasts anyways. So help us there. We'd appreciate it. It's free, so that's awesome. What's not free is being one of our sponsors, and we love shouting them out as well. You can sponsor our show on Apple Podcasts, Captivate, or Patreon. Today we're shouting out Russell Gentry. I love you, dude. You are the coolest. He's the first sponsor we've had on any podcast, actually, and a good friend of mine. I love him. Russell. Yeah. He's got several merch from sponsoring us on both Patreons for this and Whole Church. So he's a cool guy. So be like Russell, support our show for $3 a month, and you'll get your own shout out as well as some of that free merch every so often, which is sick. If you want to hear more Finding the Good, there's a link down below in the show notes. You can find the whole series. It's awesome. I love everything we've done so far. This one might be my favorite because I got to talk with Nick more on this one because I don't think he's been on any of the others. Yeah. Smooches, guys. Anyway, remember, we're all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests. Yeah.
Hello there, listener. This is Evan Garcia, and I just wanted to jump in here to remind you and to let you know of our Facebook groups and our Discord server. These are great communities where you can post and share memes and talk with the hosts, and we have votes and some polls for future episode topics and fun interactions with our host. So just wanted to remind you that we are focused on community with you listeners, and we love each and every one of you guys listening. Thank you, guys.
Hi friends, it's Laura here, and I just wanted to say thank you for listening to our show. Systematic Geekology is a part of a larger podcast network called the Anazal Podcast Network. Dummy for Theology is Joshua Noel's show discussing different theological topics from various perspectives and attempting to give people more questions than answers. My Seminary Life is Brandon Knight's show. It started as him going through what he was learning in seminary, and after he graduated, he's been doing independent studies and has a lot of fun series like on hermeneutics, Bonhoeffer Summer, and worship. And then Friday Night Frights is a monthly show with Christian Ashley and Joe Day. They have a vote on the Systematic Geekology Facebook group to choose a topic each month and discuss everything from cryptos to ghosts to aliens to serial killers and more. So we hope you'll give it a listen, and thanks for being part of what we're putting out there.